Greetings, Disney adults, Disney fans of all ages. Welcome. Last year, I did a video where I asked the question, what would Walt think of Epcot Center? But I kind of focused it around 1982 at the opening of the park. My conclusion is that while Walt would probably be disappointed at not having his planned Community of Tomorrow, I think overall he'd be pleased with what the Disney company gave us instead. In this video, I want to talk about Epcot kind of after that. So we're going to be looking at Epcot from about early 80s up through the early 2000s, so about the first 20 years of Epcot's existence. This was a tough video for me to make, and it's one that's been rattling around in my mind, but I've kind of resisted doing it because I love Epcot. But I'm going to be honest with you, my favorite iteration of Epcot was the original version of Epcot. I love that version, and I'm a little hesitant to kind of discuss this because I know that people have many opinions about Epcot, with many people saying we love Epcot now, but there are others like me who say I actually preferred the original Epcot. Not saying I don't like Epcot now, I still love going to Epcot Center. There's a lot of great attractions that I miss that were there in 82, 83, 84 that I sorely miss. And we want to ask the question, what would Walt think? And we're going to kind of ask the question, what would Walt think of the next phase of Epcot, the first 20 years or so of Epcot Center? So that's what we're going to ask. And that's what we're going to focus on. Now, of course, before we do that, we first have to take a little bit of a trip. So join me, because we're going to go back in time.
When Walt Disney World wants the rest of the world to know about their new attractions, they bring in the media from all corners of the globe. Well, most of the media tonight on this Saturday occasion have put down their pens and papers and put on formal attire like this to welcome in and enjoy some of the festivities. And we wanted to share those with you tonight because there are a lot of stars here.
Et maintenant, je déclare Euro Disney officiellement ouvert.
I have a theory. And you might be asking yourself, Todd, who cares about your theory? Thought this was what would Walt think, not what would Todd think. And you are correct. But just go with me now. You're welcome to disagree with my theory. You're welcome to say that I'm completely wrong. And in fact, I'd love it if you'd comment and let me know if you think I'm way off base or if you think there's something to what I'm saying. Disneyland was opened in 1955. 16 years later, 1971, we see the opening of the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. And then 11 years later, we see the opening of Epcot Center at Walt Disney World. So that's a total of 27 years. So in that 27 years, the Disney company opened 3 different theme parks. Now, after that, over the next 10 years, the Disney company opened 3 more parks. There was Tokyo Disneyland, which opened in 1983, Disney's MGM Studios, which opened in 1989, And then there was Euro Disneyland, which opened in 1992. So within a 10-year period, the Disney company literally doubled the number of parks. And they had expanded as well into international parks. Something that, to be honest, I don't know if Walt even considered. Now let's talk a little bit about what else was going on in the Disney company right around this time. Now, of course, Walt Disney passed in 1966. His brother Roy, just a few years later, around 1972, passed away. And for quite a while, the Disney company kind of floundered. During the 70s, the early part of the 80s, the Disney company really lost some of its credibility and came extremely close to being bought out, which probably would have led to dismantling the company and putting the various parts all over, and would definitely mean we would not have the Disney that we know and love today. Enter Michael Eisner. Now, before you turn off the video, I know that Michael Eisner is somewhat of a controversial, polarizing figure within the Disney community. That said, I do think that we owe him a debt of gratitude, because Michael Eisner came in '84 at a time when no one else really could be found to do the job, at a time when the company was sorely lacking leadership in any direction, and he came and he gave the company that direction and that leadership. And I believe, through his efforts, saved the Disney company. As Michael Eisner is there, and he's working hard to get the Disney company back to where it once was, he was the one who was at its helm during what we call the Disney Renaissance. Movies such as The Little Mermaid in 1989, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, great films finally being produced by the Disney company. He was the one at the helm for Disney's MGM Studios and for Euro Disneyland. And it was he who declared the 90s to be the Disney decade, which included things such as the Disney Renaissance, the great movies that we started seeing, plus our Disney's forays into television, and specifically cable television with the Disney Channel. And here's my theory. Like I said, go with me for just a moment. In the midst of all this expansion, in the midst of expanding the Disney parks all over the world, in the midst of expanding into television and trying to get movies that people were excited about seeing again, I think the original 3 parks were kind of left in the dust a little bit. Now, not a big deal for the Magic Kingdom or for Disneyland. After all, if you're planning a trip to Disney, what are some things that you're thinking about? Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, Teacups, Dumbo. All of those things are found in the Magic Kingdom or in Disneyland. Epcot, however, was the newcomer. They were the new kid on the block. They were specifically designed for edutainment, attractions that were more educational. There were no thrill rides in Epcot Center at all. It was seen as more of an adult type park. There was no IP in Epcot at all. And so Epcot, I believe, and this is my theory, I believe Epcot was kind of left in the dust a little bit by all the other stuff going on. And so several years later, when the Disney company was looking and trying to see how everything was doing, they were a little underwhelmed by how Epcot was doing. But I think it's because nobody really was putting any effort into it. Again, my theory. Disagree with me if you would like, and that's perfectly okay. One thing that they decided was that Epcot needed more thrill rides. Remember, there were none. So they decided we need to try to make it more appealing to some younger people. So let's get some more thrill rides into Epcot. I'm going to make an argument, just a small argument, for Maelstrom, which opened in 1988. I kind of thought it was thrilling. I mean, it does feature those 2 drops. Now, fair enough. You don't have any restraints or anything. It's similar to Pirates of the Caribbean in that the drops are not great. You can just go along in the boat. But I know those drops were what I used to really enjoy and why I wanted to ride Maelstrom so much. So I'll make an argument for Maelstrom kind of being a thrill ride. But the first official thrill ride would have been Body Wars. Body Wars was located in the Wonders of Life Pavilion, sponsored by MetLife, and it was sort of a look at the human body. Body Wars was a motion simulator attraction. Think Star Tours, only instead of traveling to the Wookiee planet or Tatooine and fighting against the First Order, instead you're traveling through the circulatory system and fighting against a disease. So that was Body Wars. Like I said, motion simulator attraction, and it opened in 1989. Now, Epcot wouldn't get its next thrill ride for another 10 years. It wouldn't be until Test Track. And I do want to point this out. Test Track, we really can't blame the Disney company for. In a video I saw about the opening of World of Motion at Epcot Center, they featured, I think, the president of General Motors at the time, who actually got up and said, "This is not the ride we really intend to be here permanently. This is just a temporary ride, World of Motion." He's like, "We want something more thrilling and more exciting." Actually makes a degree of sense. If you're the president of General Motors and you're sponsoring a ride at a theme park, you kind of want people to associate your car with a fast, thrilling ride. Makes sense to me. I miss World of Motion still, but I actually did like Test Track when it opened. Now, Test Track opened in 1999. Interestingly enough, a few years prior, in 1993, I believe, or might have been 94, Horizons, my personal favorite attraction in the original Epcot, closed, and it was closed for about a year. Everyone was told refurbishment, but it was a lengthy refurbishment, and many people feared that the attraction was gone forever. But then suddenly, without any fanfare, it reopened. Horizons reopened, and just a short time later, World of Motion closed. They were also doing refurbishments on Universe of Energy at the time, so to have something open on that side of the park, Horizons, was kept open. In 1999, just before the official opening of Test Track, Horizons closed down, this time for good. It was a permanent closure, and it was replaced by Mission Space, another thrill ride, a simulator ride where you're traveling into space. So by the early 2000s, Epcot Center has now got a few thrill rides. They have Body Wars in Wonders of Life. They have Test Track. They have Mission Space. And yes, I'm going to throw Maelstrom out there because it's kind of a thrill ride. So there were a few more thrill rides in Epcot. Still not a lot of thrill rides, but a few more thrill rides that were put in Epcot. Something else Epcot did, and this is one of those things that I very much question, is they got rid of the original Journey into Imagination, a wonderful, wonderful attraction designed by the legend himself, Tony Baxter. Well, they decided it was just too long, so they completely reworked Journey into Imagination, made it a shorter track, basically got rid of Figment, completely got rid of Dreamfinder. The attraction came under such intense critical fire that it only lasted 2 years before being redesigned yet again to what we have now, which is better than Journey into Your Imagination, but doesn't hold a candle to the original Tony Baxter wonderful attraction. But again, it was in an effort to shorten the attraction because they were worried people didn't want to wait for Journey into Imagination because it was such a long ride. Again, I question that one. So, what would Walt think of Epcot over its first 20 years? Well, first of all, let's tackle the whole thrill rides part. I did a video last year where I discussed thrill rides in the parks, and overall, Walt would have been fine with thrill rides. Walt certainly had no objection to thrill rides, as evidenced by the Matterhorn bobsleds. Now, he did want to have attractions that everybody, or that more people could ride. He didn't want to exclude people, but overall, with thrill rides themselves, I don't think Walt had an issue. So Body Wars, changing of Test Track, or the changing of World of Motion into Test Track, I don't think would have been a problem. In fact, the original designs for Epcot included a Matterhorn bobsled kind of ride that would have been at the Japan Pavilion, and it would have been sledding down Mount Fuji. Wouldn't that have been a cool ride to have ridden? But thrill rides at Epcot I don't think are the issue. Now, something else that happened during this period that I didn't mention in the earlier part of the video were the festivals. I did a video about the festivals recently, and I think Walt would be thrilled with the festivals that happen at Epcot Center. The festival started in the mid-90s, and I think Walt would have been super happy with those. But Journey into Imagination and the changing of horizons, those are the things I think Walt would have said no. Now, is it because they were change? No. I have shared on videos before that Walt was a fan of change. He knew that things had to change, and he appreciated change. He had no issues with change whatsoever. But in my last video on Country Bears, I shared this. I do believe 100% Walt would say the change needs to be for the better. Make sure that the change is a good change. When it comes to Journey into Imagination, we took an absolutely brilliantly designed, wonderful ride and turned it into a mediocre, subpar, horrible attraction that they quickly replaced, but what we have again now is still nothing compared to the original Tony Baxter inspired Journey into Imagination. That was a change for the worse, and Walt would have hated it. And as far as Horizons into Mission Space, I said earlier, Walt had no problem with thrill rides, but Walt also knew that his parks were designed for the family. If you've got small children, many of them cannot ride Mission Space. If you've got somebody who gets motion sick easily, or even kind of easily, they cannot ride Mission Space. And I think Walt would say that's not an attraction we want. And in particular, replacing an attraction that really was the hallmark of all Epcot was supposed to be. An attraction that celebrated the future and future technologies. I believe Walt would have said, let's keep that attraction, but let's make sure that we consistently update it to include new technologies. The idea of replacing it with a flight simulator that'll make you throw up, I think Walt would have very much been against. What do you think? What do you think of Epcot Center? Do me a favor, give me a like, subscribe to my channel. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I hope to see you in Disney World very soon.